Mark had spent weeks in the house since discovering the hidden space behind the mirror. Each day had been filled with reading notebooks, studying photographs, and learning everything his grandma had left for him. The house no longer felt like a quiet, forgotten place. It had become a world of its own, a place of learning, vigilance, quiet anticipation. The mirror had remained still for days, but Mark knew better than to trust silence. The notebooks had warned that patience was the mirror's greatest weapon. It waited, calm and quiet, until the guardian made a mistake or let curiosity take over. Then it would test them. It would push the limits of what was safe. He had grown used to the quiet tension in the house. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of leaves outside, every soft sound from the walls reminded him that he was not alone. He had come to understand the mirror not as a simple object, but as a being that needed respect and caution. That evening, as the sky turned deep orange and red, Mark returned to the hidden space. The shelves of notebooks and photographs had been organized carefully. Each one now told a story connected to the next. He placed the last notebook on the table and opened it. Its pages were worn and faded, but the words were clear. "Tonight will be the final test," the notebook read. "The mirror will attempt to tempt the guardian. It will show visions, call with voices, and create shadows that are not there. Do not fear. Remember that the mirror cannot act fully in our world unless you allow it. The key is your shield. Your mind is your strongest weapon. The first door is only a beginning. You will have a choice to make. Choose wisely, and the mirror will rest. Choose poorly, and the path will open." Mark held his breath. His fingers brushed the key. It felt heavier than before, as if it knew what was coming. He stood and walked slowly to the mirror. The hallway was quiet. The house felt alive with anticipation. Every shadow seemed longer, every corner darker, yet nothing had moved. He stared into the glass. At first, it reflected the hallway exactly as it was. Then, slowly, the image began to change. The walls stretched in the reflection, deeper and darker than reality. The lamp's light disappeared from the reflection, leaving only shadows. And then he saw the shape. It was tall, dark, and silent, standing just beyond the mirrored hallway. The figure's face was hidden, but its presence was clear. It was patient, watching him, waiting for a reaction. Mark's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. He remembered the notebook's warning. Do not fear. Do not panic. The mirror could not act unless he allowed it. The figure moved slightly, but the movement was almost imperceptible. Then the mirror shifted again. The first door appeared, a simple wooden door with a keyhole in the center. Light glowed faintly around its edges, like a soft warning. Mark's eyes narrowed. He knew this was the final test. The first door had appeared once before, and he had sealed it with the key. Now it had returned, and the mirror was asking him to make a choice. He raised the key slowly. It felt cold in his hand. The metal was smooth, carved with strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. He stepped closer to the mirror, careful not to let fear take control. The reflection in the glass made the hallway seem endless. But he knew he could not hesitate. Mark placed the key in the keyhole of the first door. He paused, taking a deep breath. One turn. That was all he needed. He remembered his grandma's words, the warnings in the notebooks, and the history of the guardians who had come before him. Patience, caution, and focus were the only weapons against the mirror. He turned the key slowly. A low hum filled the room, vibrating in his chest. The first door inside the mirror shook, and a line of light appeared along its edges. Shadows inside the reflection swirled, forming shapes that tried to reach him, whispering words that made no sense. The figure in the mirrored hallway stretched and twisted. Moving closer with every heartbeat, Mark forced his mind to remain clear. He remembered the notebook. The mirror cannot act unless you allow it. His fear must not control him. He focused on the key, the metal cold and steady in his hand. He turned it fully once. The hum grew louder, then suddenly stopped. The first door shivered, then closed completely. The line of light faded. The mirrored hallway returned to its normal reflection of his own hallway. The figure had vanished. The shadows had returned to their corners. The house seemed to breathe a quiet sigh. Mark stepped back, his legs trembling. He had passed the test. The mirror had been restless, tempting him with fear, shadows, and strange movements. But he had remained calm. He had used the key only as instructed. He had sealed the first door. For a long moment, he just stood staring at the mirror. The reflections were normal. The hallway looked ordinary. Yet Mark knew the mirror had recognized him. It had tested him and acknowledged his role as guardian. He placed the key carefully on the table. The metal felt lighter now, as if it had been satisfied with his decision. He walked to the hidden space and examined the notebooks again. Each one had been part of his training. Each had prepared him for this moment. He realized now that his grandma had been guiding him even in death, leaving instructions and warnings so that he could succeed. The photographs also told a story. The mirror had followed his family for generations, always choosing someone who could protect it. Some guardians had failed. Some had disappeared. His grandma had been successful. Now he had taken up the responsibility. Mark knew that the mirror could not be destroyed, but it could be respected. It could be sealed and kept calm, and he had proven that he could do it. The notebooks, the key, and the history of the guardians had all led to this moment. He felt a strange peace settle over him. The house no longer felt heavy. The shadows were just shadows, and the air no longer pressed against his chest. The mirror at the end of the hallway remained quiet and still, reflecting only the hallway as it should be. Mark understood that his role as guardian was not over. The mirror would continue to test him and new challenges might arise. But he was ready. He had the knowledge, the tools, and the resolve to protect the house and keep the mirror at rest. He walked through the house slowly, checking every corner. Everything was in place. The lamp was still on. The floorboards creaked only as they should. The hidden space behind the mirror remained organized, the notebooks carefully arranged for future guidance. The key rested safely on the table, waiting for when it might be needed again. Mark returned to the living room and sat in the chair. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the quiet. For the first time since discovering the mirror, he felt completely calm. The house had transformed from a place of memories to a place of purpose. He was no longer a visitor. He was a guardian, and he understood the responsibility that came with that title. As he opened his eyes, the first light of morning filtered through the windows. The sky was brightening, and the shadows of the night had retreated. The world outside continued as usual, unaware of the hidden door, the mirror, or the secret that had been tested and sealed. Mark smiled faintly. Life outside would go on, but inside the house, he had fulfilled his duty. He stood up and walked to the mirror one last time before leaving the hallway. He looked at his own reflection and nodded quietly. He did not need to see the figure or the shadows again. The first door was sealed. The mirror was calm. The key was safe. And he was ready for whatever might come in the future. Mark left the house that morning with a sense of purpose. He knew he would return, not as a visitor or a grandson, but as a guardian. The mirror had chosen him, and he had accepted the responsibility. He had learned patience, courage, and careful judgment. He had faced fear and passed the test. The house remained quiet behind him. The hidden space waited patiently. The mirror reflected the hallway, ordinary and still, as if nothing had happened. Yet everything had changed. The line of guardians continued, and Mark had become part of that history, and so the house at the edge of the quiet street kept its secret. The mirror rested, the first door remained sealed, and the key waited. Mark understood that the world would continue unaware of the mirror's existence, and that was how it should be. The secret was safe, the guardian was ready, and the house, once forgotten, now stood as a silent protector of a secret older than time. Mark turned from the mirror and walked outside into the morning light. The wind moved gently through the trees. The street was quiet, the town unaware of the events inside the old wooden house. He took a deep breath and smiled. The task was not finished forever, but for now, he had done what was needed. He had honored his grandmother's work, learned the truth, and embraced the responsibility that had been passed down through generations, Mark knew that as long as he remained vigilant, the mirror would stay calm, the hidden door would remain sealed, and the world would be safe. And with that knowledge, he stepped fully into the sunlight, ready to continue the line of guardians and to protect the secret for as long as it needed. Mark could not sleep. The events of the night had left him restless. Every corner of the old house seemed alive now. Shadows moved in ways that did not make sense, and even the air felt heavier than before. He sat in the living room, the strange key resting on the table, the notebook spread around him like a circle of questions. The mirror at the end of the hallway reflected the dim light from the lamp. It was quiet and still, but Mark knew it was not simply glass. It had a life of its own, one that had called to his family for generations. He reached for another notebook, the smallest one in the pile. Its cover was thin and fragile, almost delicate. Opening it, he found the handwriting different from the others. This one did not belong to his grandma. The letters were older, careful, almost precise. Whoever had written these pages had lived long ago. The notebook began to explain the origins of the mirror. It was never made by human hands, the first line read. It has existed far longer than any town or house. The mirror finds a place where it will wait. It watches. It listens. It chooses a guardian, someone who will keep it from waking fully. Those who ignore its presence do not survive to tell the story. Those who care for it become part of its history. Mark's fingers shook slightly as he read. The mirror had chosen his grandma, and now it had chosen him. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, but also a strange feeling of purpose. He understood that his role was not only to guard the mirror, but also to protect others from whatever lay beyond it. The notebook continued. The key is the first step. It opens the door that separates our world from what lies beyond. Never turn it more than once. Never remove it fully, or the path will weaken. The guardian must be cautious, patient, and brave. Mark looked at the key on the table. He had already turned it once in the mirror, and the first door had appeared and closed. That had been only the beginning. The notebook warned that the first door was never the last. If the seal weakened again, the mirror would test the guardian. It would tempt curiosity, and that curiosity could be dangerous. He set the notebook aside and decided he needed more information. He returned to the hidden space behind the mirror. The shelves of notebooks and photographs seemed to press against him as he approached. He pulled out a larger notebook with thicker pages. Its cover had no writing, only a faint pattern carved into it, like a secret code. The smell of old paper filled the air, a mixture of dust and history. Opening the notebook, Mark found it filled with sketches. Some were maps of strange houses and rooms. Others were diagrams of doors and mirrors placed in unusual positions. Many of the sketches had notes written in margins explaining the properties of the mirror. It was a guide, a manual of sorts, left by the previous guardian. One page caught his attention. It showed the mirror in his grandma's house. Next to it was a drawing of a figure standing behind the glass. The figure's face was hidden, and the sketch had a note written in careful letters. Do not let it enter. It will find a way if the path is weak. Mark's heart raced. The figure in the sketch reminded him of the shape he had seen in the mirror during the night. It had been tall, quiet, and patient, watching him without moving. Now he understood why. The mirror had been testing him. It was not a toy. It was a gate, and he had stepped too close to it. He turned another page and found drawings of the key. Each sketch was different, showing how it fit into locks of strange design. The notes explained that the key could connect with any first door the mirror created. Turning it once would seal the first door, but turning it more than once could open it fully and weaken. The seal that had protected the world for centuries. Mark realized he was holding more than knowledge. He was holding instructions for survival, guidance for guarding something that could not be controlled. The notebook seemed to speak directly to him, guiding him with wisdom written long before he existed. He put the notebook down carefully and stepped back. The mirror at the end of the hallway remained quiet. It reflected the lamp's light, but no longer showed the strange hallway or the first door. Everything appeared normal. Yet Mark could feel the presence behind it, patient and waiting. He needed to prepare. The notebooks had mentioned that guardians often made mistakes, and even small mistakes could allow the mirror to grow restless. He began organizing the notebooks and photographs in order, trying to understand the sequence of events. Each page added more pieces to the puzzle, but none gave the complete answer. The mirror's origin, the full purpose of the key, the true nature of what lay beyond the first door were still unknown. Hours passed, and the house grew colder. Shadows stretched along the walls and corners, though no wind blew through the rooms. Mark stayed at the table, reading, sketching notes, and planning. He realized that the mirror's presence had always been part of his life, even if he had not noticed it. Every family home where his ancestors had lived contained it. It had waited for a guardian in each generation. Now he had been chosen. Suddenly, a soft sound echoed from the mirror. It was almost a whisper, a quiet breath that could have been the wind or could have been something else. Mark froze. He stared at the glass, expecting to see the shape again. Nothing appeared, yet he could feel a weight pressing from the other side. A gentle pressure, patient and quiet. He understood what the notebooks had meant. The mirror was aware. It watched. It waited. And it tested. The first door had been a test, and he had passed. Now, the real work began. Mark decided to study the photographs more closely. Each photograph showed a different house, a different guardian, and the same mirror placed carefully on a wall. Some guardians had been careful, others careless. Notes written on the back of certain photographs explained what had happened to those who ignored warnings. In every case, the mirror had become restless, and strange events had followed. Shadows moved, objects disappeared, sounds echoed from empty rooms. The worst cases had ended tragically. Those guardians had never been heard from again. Mark's hands shook as he placed the photos in order. He realized how lucky he was. His grandma had guarded the mirror carefully. She had prepared him without even being able to speak directly about it. Every notebook, every photograph, every warning she had left was a lesson for him. He now understood the responsibility that rested on his shoulders. As the night deepened, he returned to the mirror. He studied the glass and frame carefully, searching for clues he might have missed. The carvings on the frame seemed to shift slightly in the lamplight, but when he blinked, they looked normal again. The mirror was subtle. It did not move openly, but it communicated with those who knew how to watch. Mark reached out and touched the cold frame. The wood felt smooth yet alive, almost like it was listening to him. He spoke softly, though he did not know if anyone or anything would hear him. "I understand now. I will guard this house. I will guard the mirror. I will not let the path open. I will follow the instructions. I will be careful." The mirror remained quiet. There was no answer. Yet Mark felt a sense of acknowledgement, as if the mirror had registered his words. He returned to the table and picked up the key once more. He examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands. The weight, the carvings, and the cold metal all told him the same truth. He must respect it. Use it only when necessary, and never allow it to fall into careless hands. The first turn of the key had been enough to seal the first door, but he knew that more tests would come. He made a plan. He would study every notebook. He would learn every detail about the mirror, and he would be ready for the next test whenever it came. The house would be his training ground, and the mirror his teacher. The past guardians had prepared him without speaking, guiding him through written words and photographs. Now it was his responsibility to continue the line of guardians, to keep the world safe from what the mirror might release. Mark leaned back in the chair, feeling exhausted. His mind was full of the notebooks, the photographs, and the warnings. Yet there was a strange calmness in him. He had accepted the task. The weight of responsibility had settled on his shoulders, but it did not crush him. It made him focused, alert, and determined. He was no longer just a grandson visiting his grandma's house. He was a guardian, chosen by a force that had existed long before him. Outside, the first light of dawn began to touch the trees. The shadows shifted slowly, retreating into corners and the edges of the house. Mark stood and walked toward the mirror once more. He studied it carefully in the soft morning light. The reflections were normal. The first door had not appeared again. The key rested safely on the table. For now, everything was calm. Yet Mark knew that the mirror was patient. It would wait. It would test him again. And when it did, he would need to be ready. He smiled faintly. It was not a smile of happiness, but a smile of determination. The house was quiet, the air was calm, and the mirror remained still. But Mark understood the truth now. This was his life. This was his responsibility, and he would not fail. After his grandma's death, Mark felt something heavy settle inside his chest. It was not only sadness, it was also a strange feeling that he could not explain, like a soft warning stuck deep in his heart. The house where she had lived for so many years now belonged to him. It was a small house at the far end of a quiet street, a place that almost everyone in town had forgotten. But Mark had not forgotten it. Every corner of the house held a memory from his childhood. He had not returned for many years. Life had taken him far away. Work became his world, and time slipped through his hands. Now he stood outside the old gate, staring at the same wooden door he used to open as a child. The paint was peeling. The wood looked tired. The garden was filled with wild plants growing wherever they wished. The house looked lonely, like it had been waiting for someone who never came. Mark took a deep breath and pushed open the gate. It made a low sound as if it was waking up from a long sleep. He walked slowly down the small path and placed his hand on the door. For a moment, he remembered his grandma standing there, smiling, her eyes gentle and warm. She used to call his name and open the door for him every time he came to visit. Now there was only silence. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was still and cool. The house smelled like dust, old wood, and something faintly sweet, like the soap his grandma used. Light came in through the windows, creating thin lines on the floor. Everything inside was just the same as before. The small table, the old chair by the window, the shelf filled with books she never talked about. Mark walked deeper inside. His foot touched the floor gently, but it still made a soft sound. Each step echoed in the quiet rooms. He looked around and felt like the house was watching him. It was an odd thought, and he softly laughed at himself. He told his mind to stay calm as he moved through the hallway. He saw the mirror. It was the same mirror that had always been there, hanging at the end of the hall. It was tall and narrow, with a dark wooden frame carved in strange patterns. Even as a child, Mark had wondered why his grandma never let him touch it. Every time he got close to it, she told him to stay away. She never gave a clear reason. She only said the mirror was not for playing. Now no one was there to stop him. He walked closer. The floor felt colder beneath his feet as he reached the end of the hallway. He stood in front of the mirror and looked at his reflection. A man in his late 20s stared back at him. His face looked serious. His eyes held many thoughts. For a moment he thought his reflection moved slowly, like it did not match him. He blinked, and it returned to normal. He shook his head and told himself that it was just his imagination. He raised his hand, placed it on the frame of the mirror. The wood felt cold, much colder than it should have felt inside a closed house. The carvings on the frame seemed deeper when he touched them, as if tiny shapes were hidden inside the lines. He traced his fingers along the edge slowly. The mirror was dusty. The glass itself was clear. He gently pushed the mirror. It did not move at first. He pushed a little harder. The mirror gave a small sound, like wood rubbing against wood. It was loose. His heart started to beat faster. He had always believed the mirror was fixed on the wall. Now he realized it was covering something. Carefully, he lifted the mirror from the hook that held it in place. It was heavier than he expected. With effort, he pulled it away from the wall and leaned it gently to the side. What he saw behind it made his body freeze. The wall behind the mirror was not a normal wall. There were old wooden boards placed carefully together, but they were darker than the rest of the house. In the center of the boards, there was a small metal handle. It did not belong there. Mark stared at the handle for a long moment. His mind tried to understand what he was seeing. There was a hidden door inside the wall. His grandma had lived in this house for many years. Why had he never known about this? He raised his hand and touched the handle. It was very cold to the touch. A strange feeling traveled up his arm like a quiet warning. Still, curiosity was stronger than fear. He pulled the handle slowly. The wooden panel opened with a long, slow sound. Dust moved into the air. Mark covered his mouth as tiny particles floated around him. Behind the panel was a narrow, hidden space. It was not very large, but deep enough to hold shelves. Inside were many small notebooks, stacked neatly. Each notebook looked old, with yellowed pages and worn-out covers. Some of them were tied with thin strings. On another shelf, he saw old photographs placed carefully in piles. The faces in the photos were not clear at first glance, but they looked serious and distant. And in the center of the hidden space, on a small wooden stand, there was an old key. It was not a normal key. The metal was dark and heavy, and unusual symbols were carved along the surface. The shapes were not familiar letters or numbers. They looked like signs from another time, or another world. Mark felt a chill run through his body. Why would his grandma hide notebooks, photos, and a strange key behind a mirror? He slowly reached out and picked up one of the notebooks. The cover was worn and soft. He opened the first page. Inside, words were written in careful handwriting. The lines were clear, even though the ink had faded. The text spoke about strange feelings, his hidden fears and warnings about something that should never be released. The language was simple, but the meaning was troubling. Every page talked about watching, waiting, keeping something locked away. Mark closed the notebook slowly. His gaze moved to the photographs. He picked up one and looked at it closely. It showed a younger version of his grandma standing near the house, but her expression was different. She looked scared. Beside her, there was a shadow that did not look like a person, yet it stood like one. Another photo showed the same mirror, but it was placed in a different room, in a different house. It looked like the mirror had traveled from place to place over many years. Mark swallowed hard. The mirror was not just decoration. It was a cover. It was a guard. He turned his attention back to the strange key. His fingers hovered over it. Something inside him told him not to touch it. Another part of him felt drawn to it, like it belonged in his hand. He picked it up. The moment his skin touched the cold metal, a strong feeling passed through his mind. Images appeared, fast and confusing. The mirror standing in different rooms. Doors opening and closing. Strange places filled with darkness and silence. Then his grandma's voice, soft but serious, filled his thoughts. Do not let it be opened. Mark dropped the key in shock. It fell onto the wooden stand with a sharp sound. He stepped back, breathing heavily, trying to calm his racing heart. The room felt colder now. The air felt heavier. The hallway behind him seemed longer than before. The silence pressed against his ears. He looked at the mirror still leaning against the wall. For a brief second, he could have sworn that the reflection inside it had changed. Even though it was not facing him, a deep understanding began to form in his mind. His grandma had not been an ordinary woman. Living in a quiet house, she had been guarding something, hiding something, protecting others from something. And now that she was gone, that duty had fallen on him. Mark knew one thing for sure. Moving that mirror had changed everything. And whatever was connected to that hidden space behind, the wall had not been meant to be seen by anyone, especially him. Mark stood in the hallway, his eyes fixed on the hidden space behind the wall. The air felt heavier than before, like it had filled with something unseen. His heart was still beating fast, and his hands felt cold even though the house itself was not cold. The strange key lay on the small wooden stand, quiet and still, as if it had never given him those troubling images. He slowly turned his head toward the open window at the end of the hallway. The sunlight was fading. The sky outside was moving toward evening. He had not noticed how much time had passed while he stood there, trapped in shock. He knew he should leave the house. Everything inside him said that this was not safe. But another voice in his mind kept whispering that he must understand what his grandma had been hiding. Mark stepped back toward the hidden shelves. He picked up one of the notebooks again, this time holding it firmly. If his grandma had written these words, then these pages must hold the truth. And the truth was already calling him. He walked to the small table in the living room and sat down. The old chair made a soft sound as he sat. He opened the notebook and began reading more carefully. The writing was slow, neat, and careful. Every word looked like it had been written with great thought. The first pages spoke about the mirror. The mirror is not just glass and wood. It is a door. It is a line between what is seen and what is hidden. I did not choose it. It found me. It always finds someone. Mark felt a tightness in his chest as he read those words. The next page spoke about the key. The key is not for any normal lock. It does not open a room. It opens a path that should remain closed. I guard it so others do not suffer. His fingers tightened around the notebook. He turned another page. If the mirror is moved and the key is touched, the one who finds it will begin to see what I saw. They will feel what I felt. I pray it will never be someone I love. Mark closed his eyes for a moment. His grandma had known this day might come. She had known that one day someone would find the truth behind the mirror, and she had hoped it would not be someone close to her. He slowly opened his eyes and continued. Reading the pages started telling a story. A story from many years ago when his grandma was still young. She had lived in another town back then, in a house that did not belong to her. One night she had heard a strange whisper near her window. When she looked outside, she saw the mirror standing against the wall of the house. Even though no one had placed it there, it had been there the next morning too. People in the town said it had come from nowhere. They said it should be destroyed. But the moment someone tried to break it, they felt a fear so strong that they stepped away. His grandma had felt something different. She had not felt fear. She had felt responsibility. She had taken the mirror into her house and hung it on the wall. That was when the strange events began. She heard soft sounds at night. She saw shadows move where there was no light. She felt watched even when she was alone. Then she found the hidden space behind it, just like Mark had. And that was where she found the key in the notebooks. It's left by the person who had owned it before her. A person who had disappeared without a trace. I did not choose this life, but the mirror chose me. And now, I must be the one who stands between this world and what lies beyond it. Mark gently closed the notebook and placed it on the table. His thoughts were spinning. Everything felt unreal. His grandma had lived her entire life guarding, a secret that no one else knew about. He stood up and walked slowly back to the mirror. It was still leaning against the wall from where he had placed it. He stared at it carefully, keeping a safe distance. The reflection now looked normal again. It showed the hallway, the floor, the wall, and a small part of the ceiling. But something about it felt wrong, like it was quietly waiting. Mark felt a low sound in his ears, almost like a hum. He could not tell if it was coming from the house or from the mirror itself. He turned his head to look around. The house looked the same as before. Nothing had moved. The furniture remained still. The light from the window had turned soft and orange. The day was leaving. Mark realized that night was coming, and the notebook had said that the mirror became more active at night. A chill ran down his spine. He walked back to the living room and picked up another notebook. This one was thinner than the rest. He opened it slowly, careful with the fragile pages. The writing in this one was different. It was not his grandma's handwriting. It was older. These pages spoke of a seal, a lock that places a barrier between worlds. The writer warned that if the seal weakened, strange things would begin to happen. The mirror would become more than just a reflection. You may see scenes that do not belong to your world. You may hear voices that do not come from your home. You must not answer them. You must not open the door fully. You must not use the key. Mark looked up sharply. He glanced at the hidden space behind the wall, then at the key resting on the wooden stand. The key had not moved, yet the air now felt different. It felt like something was aware of him suddenly. The mirror gave a soft sound, as if something had tapped on the glass. From the other side, Mark froze. He stared at the mirror. Nothing. Was there then? It happened again, a low knock, slow, careful, patient. His breathing became shallow. Every part of him told him to run, but his feet would not move. He watched as the reflection inside the mirror began to change slightly. The hallway inside it looked darker than the real hallway. The walls inside the reflection looked longer. The shadows inside the glass looked deeper. And then he saw a shape standing in the reflection. It did not move in the real world. But inside the mirror, it stood behind him, not close, not far, just watching. Mark wanted to turn around, but he did not. He remembered the warning in the notebooks. Do not answer. Do not respond. Do not open the door fully. He swallowed hard and kept his eyes on the mirror. The shape did not come closer. It just stood there, like it was observing him. Minutes passed in silence. Then, slowly, the shape began to fade. The reflection returned to normal. The hallway looked like the hallway again. The air became lighter. Mark stepped backward, his legs feeling weak. He bumped into the wall behind him. He knew now that this was real. This was not old stories. This was not imagination. Whatever the mirror held had noticed him. He looked down at his hands. They were shaken. He forced himself to breathe slowly. If his grandma had been strong enough to guard this secret for many years, then he had no choice but to be strong too. Running away would not solve anything. The mirror had chosen him now. He picked up the key once more, but this time he did not let fear take control. He held it carefully, like one would hold something important and dangerous. If there is a path, then there must also be a way to close it forever, he whispered to himself. The house remained silent. The mirror stood still, but somewhere, deep inside the walls, a quiet movement could be felt. As if something had shifted. Mark looked toward the hidden space again and made a decision. He would read every notebook. He would study every photo. He would find out where the mirror came from and how it could be sealed again. No matter how long it took. And as the last light of the sun disappeared outside, one thing became very clear to him. This was no longer just his grandma's secret. It was now his responsibility. Night had fully arrived, covering the small house in deep silence. Outside, the trees stood still, and even the wind seemed afraid to move. Inside, Mark sat on the old sofa, staring at the mirror at the end of the hallway. The soft glow from a small lamp barely touched the dark corners of the rooms. Everything felt different now. The house no longer felt like a place of memory. It felt like a place of waiting. The key rested on the table in front of him. It had not moved since he placed it there. Yet it felt like it was calling him in a quiet and slow way that only he could sense. Mark tried to calm his thoughts. He had seen the strange shape in the mirror. He had read the warnings. He knew he was not supposed to use the key. But the notebooks had also said that a seal could weaken. If the seal was weakening, then maybe something was already trying to cross over. He needed to know what he was facing. He stood up slowly and walked to the hidden space behind the mirror. The panel remained open, like an eye that refused to close. Inside, the rows of notebooks looked darker in the low light. He picked up another one and carried it back to the table. This notebook was thicker than the others. When he opened it, the pages made a soft sound as they turned. The handwriting belonged to his grandma again. These pages are for the one who comes after me. The first line read, "If you are reading this, then the mirror has chosen you. I am sorry. I spent many years trying to find a way to destroy it or send it back to where it came from. I failed. The best I could do was keep it calm, but nothing lasts forever. One day, the mirror will grow restless again." Mark felt a knot tighten in his stomach. You must understand this. The mirror connects to a place that should not mix with our world. It is not a place of fire or pain. It is something worse. It is emptiness that wishes to be filled. It wants shape. It wants voice. It wants to exist where it does not belong. He read those lines again slowly. The words felt heavy in his mind. The key does not open the mirror itself. It opens the first door inside the mirror. Only the chosen one can see that door. If you see it, do not panic. Panic weakens the mind, and the mind is your only shield. Mark lifted his head and looked at the mirror again. It stood quietly, showing only a reflection of the dark hallway. No shape, no movement. Just glass. He continued reading. If the first door appears, remember this. You are not meant to enter fully. You are only meant to seal what is already open. Turn the key only once. Any more than that will loosen the barrier instead of closing it. Mark closed the notebook with shaking hands. Turn the key only once. The words echoed in his thoughts. He picked up the key from the table. It felt heavier now, as if it had gained weight from the night around it. He stood up and walked slowly toward the mirror. Every step echoed. His breathing was slow and controlled. He stopped only a few feet away from the glass. He looked into the mirror at first, showed only his reflection in the hallway behind him. Then, slowly, the image began to change. The hallway and the reflection grew longer. The walls inside the mirror stretched into shadows. The light from the lamp disappeared from the reflection, even though the real lamp was still shining. Then he saw the door. It was standing inside the mirror. At the end of the long dark hallway, a simple wooden door, old and worn. In the center of that door was a keyhole. Mark's heart pounded. The first door had appeared. He looked down at the key in his hand. The shape of the key matched the shape of the keyhole inside the mirror almost perfectly. He remembered the words. Turn the key only once. Slowly, he raised the key toward the mirror. When the tip of the key touched the glass, the surface did not feel hard. It felt like cold water. The key passed through the mirror as if the glass, well, was not there. Mark took a careful step closer. He pushed the key forward and placed it into the keyhole of the door inside the mirror. He could feel the metal touch the inside of the lock. Even though his body was still standing in the hallway of the real house, he turned the key once. A deep, low sound filled the air, like the echo of something old waking up and then falling back asleep. The door inside the mirror shook slightly. A thin line of light appeared around its edges, then slowly faded away. Mark pulled the key back. It came out of the mirror and returned to the real world in his hand. The door inside the mirror began to fade. The long, dark hallway shrank. The reflection returned to normal. The mirror once again showed only the hallway of the house. Silence returned. Mark stepped back, his heart racing. He stared at the mirror, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. He stood there for a long moment, listening to his own breathing. Then he felt it. Relief. The air in the house changed. It felt lighter, less heavy. The strange pressure he had felt since finding the hidden space slowly lifted. He placed the key back on the table and sat down. His whole body felt tired, like he had just carried a great weight. Minutes passed. Then something else happened. He heard a soft sound coming from inside the walls. It was not threatening. It was almost gentle. Like a deep sigh, he remembered another line from the notebook. When the first door is sealed, the mirror will rest for a while. But the path will not disappear. You must finish what I started. Mark looked at the shelves of notebooks and the stack of photographs. There was more he had to learn. He picked up the photographs and began to examine them one by one. Some showed different houses. Some showed the mirror placed in rooms that did not look like his grandma's home. Some even showed buildings made of stone, far older than anything in his town. In one photograph, he saw a young man standing near the mirror. The man's face looked strangely familiar. It took Mark a moment to realize why. The man looked almost exactly like him. Same eyes, same shape of face, same serious expression. At the back of the photograph there was a short note. The mirror follows the same blood. It calls to the same line. It returns when the time is right. Mark lowered the photo slowly. This was not random. The mirror had not just chosen his grandma. It had chosen their family, a long line of watchers. Without them even knowing, Mark felt a new understanding settle inside him. This was bigger than one house. Bigger than one lifetime. The mirror would return again and again, unless the path was sealed forever, and maybe, somewhere in these notebooks and pictures, the final answer was waiting for him. He looked at the mirror one more time, It stood quiet and still, but he knew that it was only sleeping, and he did not have much time to find out. How to end this forever?